What is the origin of states and governments? Broadly speaking, there are two classes of theories. Cooperative theories emphasize the role of a social contract in which people voluntarily cede privileges to a subgroup to form a government and provide public services. In this view, governments are organizations with a comparative advantage in public good provision and dispute resolution. But in extractive theories, government results from an existing imbalance in coercive power between different groups. Those with more power form a state to manage taxation and other forms of extraction, rendering government an organization used by the elite to repress society. This paper studies the formation of the first states in history in southern Iraq through the lens of these two theories. Which best describes the origins of government in this context? The region in question encompasses around 30,000 square kilometers in the southernmost part of the Fertile Crescent. From around 6000 BCE, the principal social unit was the extended household or lineage, within which disputes and other issues were resolved through mediation by kinship groups. Much of the region was marshy and unsuitable for agriculture, but this changed around 3500 BCE when southern Mesopotamia began to dry out. From about 3000 BCE, farming was possible, but only close to rivers, the boundaries of which were not themselves fixed. In particular, Iraq's main rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris, have undergone 6 sudden shifts since 5000 BCE that have altered their course. These shifts resulted from changes in rainfall patterns in Turkey and Syria, where the rivers originate, and the authors study how the first of these shifts, around 2850 BCE, affected the formation of the region's first states. Using a new archaeological dataset of all states that existed between 3900 BCE and 2700 BCE, they divide the region into 5 by 5 kilometer grid cells and compare those that were located directly next to a stretch of river before the shift, but not after, with those whose access to water was unchanged. The idea is to estimate how a river shifting away affects the likelihood of state formation. Under a cooperative view of government, a shift away should increase this likelihood, as losing access to water may create a demand for government to coordinate irrigation via long canals passing through several communities. An extractive view, on the other hand, would predict a lower level of state formation. To the extent governments exist to manage expropriation and extraction by an elite, these incentives are lower once the river shifts away and the tax base is weakened. These figures show the historical reconstruction of states over this period. The left panel shows the political situation before the river shift, while the right panel shows it after the shift. In the post-period, numerous changes have occurred. Some pre-existing cities have expanded, others have disappeared, and still others have emerged as new states. The question is, how does the river shift itself relate to these changes in state formation? The results indicate that in response to a river shifting away, Iraqis formed some of the first states and governments in history. This panel shows the river network before its shift. Blue cells indicate treated areas that were located directly next to a river before the shift, but not after, and orange dots indicate which cells were inhabited. The second panel shows state formation after the shift. Not only does the formation of new states overlap with cells who lost access to water, it is concentrated in those that were inhabited. A river shifting away is associated with a 14 percentage point increase in the probability of being part of a city-state, and this effect is entirely driven by communities forming new states rather than by the expansion of existing states. Note, as well, that there is no evidence that treated and control cells were trending differently in any way prior to the shift. These findings support a cooperative, rather than extractive, view of the origins of government. State formation is more likely in areas that lose direct access to water, and where there is now greater demand for collective irrigation. Consistent with this, there is evidence of greater public good provision. A river shift away is associated with a 12 percentage point increase in the probability that a grid cell is irrigated by a canal, and an 11 percentage point increase in the probability of having a defensive city wall. Data from cuneiform tablets also show an increase in the probability of tribute payments being recorded in the city nearest to where the river shift occurred, and there are indications of an increase in state capacity, as measured by the number of temples, palaces, and ziggurats. Together, these results suggest a cooperative arrangement in which individuals faced with a coordination problem form a government and willingly exchange resources for public services. In fact, textual analysis of cuneiform tablets indicates that these newly formed governments operated as scaled-up versions of the social structures that already existed within lineages. While kinship groups adjudicated disputes and coordinated actions within a lineage, governments extended these functions between lineages, thereby facilitating collective action across multiple communities. Overall, the patterns seen here mirror arguments rationalizing government intervention in the economy on the basis of the private under-provision of public goods and services. To read more on this topic, you can check out the paper's references to other related work. This includes research on the origins of government, as well as papers studying where and when states form.